Okay, so we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July Althea Community Call. I'm Liz, and I work with Althea on all things digital and social media related. And I'm here today with our founders, Jehan and Justin and Deborah. So we are going to be talking about a couple different things, organizers, and most of all, our Althea Blockchain that is being launched. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat as we go. And I think we'll just get right into it. So Deborah, do you want to kick us off with a little intro? And she's going to tell us what's up with all our Althea hoods.
Yeah, so just to first chat a little bit about what an Althea hood is. Actually, I've got a little bit of an echo. There we go. Thanks, Justin. So what's an Althea hood? So Althea hood is basically a network where you've selected a really good geographical location and market fit for an Althea network. And we've helped y'all out by having a landing page where people can come and indicate that they'd like to pre-register or that they're interested in the Althea service when it comes to their area. And right now we have about half a dozen networks, Althea hoods that have started, and about 4 that are really, moving forward with that. Got some exciting things happening in our Hilltop, which is an urban Tacoma, Washington deployment. They now have 60 people pre-registered that indicated that they're wanting to get Althea when that's rolled out. We also have several community partners that have indicated that they might either want to be a relay or a gateway. They're going to be doing an outreach meeting in their community not this Saturday, but the following Saturday at their Fab Lab Makerspace to let people know a little bit more what it's about, what being relay entails, and just sort of meet community members as well. Newburgh, Oregon is another deployment that's doing pretty well. They are going to be at their Old Fashioned Festival, just talking to people and getting people signed up, letting people know about the community internet there that's starting. We were also, Justin and I were recently in Napa, the Napa Valley, the Oakville area in California, meeting with organizer James Lee there, who is working on a little bit more of a business-to-business approach with the farms and wineries, setting up a Althea network there. Really great market fit. They really suffer from both low bandwidth and also really high prices. And, some of their plans start at $150 a month for about 15 megabits a second. So we'll be able to really make some headway there, I think. And then we just have a new Althea hood starting in Forest Grove, Oregon as well. Organizer Austin there has really started off great. I think they have about 20 signups already, and that's just the first couple of weeks. And so for people that are interested in starting an Althea network in their area, you can go to althea.net and sign up to be an organizer, and then we'll get in contact with you and help you get started with that. There's also althea.net/getting started that kind of goes through a little bit what setting up a network might entail, and then has lots of great links on learning more about the process.
Awesome. And anything else, Deborah?
I think that's it, unless anybody has a question.
And feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm going to pop that link in, the Getting Started link, for anyone who is interested in finding out more about being an organizer and all of that. And just follow us on Twitter. And also you can follow our Althea Hoods Facebook pages for all the updates about what's going on with our different Althea Hoods. But today we're really going to talk a lot about our blockchain that's getting launched. And so I believe, Jehan, that's you. So why don't you just take it away?
Okay, yeah. So I want to make a distinction first between the blockchain and equipment on the ground. The routers and antennas and stuff that you use to set up an Althea network, they only interface with a blockchain to make payments to each other. So they're not running, routers are not running miners or anything like that. It's just the blockchains for payments. So what we've been doing for like, you know, long time in our network in Klatskanai, Oregon, that Deborah started, is using the Ethereum blockchain, and actually using the Ethereum token as well. This is not ideal because Ethereum fluctuates in price, so we want to use a stable coin. There are a lot of stable coins on Ethereum, DAI, for instance, and so anyway, so DAI is on Ethereum. But the problem with it using it directly on the Ethereum chain is that you need to have Ether, the Ethereum token, for gas to pay for the transfers of the DAI. And so if you bring the DAI in, then people have to have two tokens. They got to have this, and it's very, very hard to explain to people. It's a pretty big issue with the design of Ethereum, is the fact that you need the Ether token to use it. It's just not good for normal people. So what we do is we have them using the Ether token. They have to deal with the price fluctuations, but at least they don't have to have two tokens juggling around. In our network in Medellin, Colombia, we're using a chain called XDAI. And XDAI is a chain which is a lot like Ethereum, but it uses the stablecoin DAI as its native token. So you only need one token on that chain. And so you get the stablecoin, and you also only need one token. So another issue with using the Ethereum main chain is that it's pretty, I wouldn't say unreliable necessarily, but basically the gas prices often spike up pretty high, which means that it causes all kinds of network problems and stuff if the gas goes really high and the routers can't pay each other. And there's a lot of other stuff where it's a little bit, Ethereum's a little bit sketchy to build on. So what we're doing, so with XDAI, that's a little better because XDAI is a lot faster because nobody's using it. But XDAI is like pretty centralized. It's a proof of authority chain, which means that there's just these miners that have been selected by a company, and they're just kind of, it's somewhere in between kind of being a true decentralized blockchain and being a payment processor. So we don't really want to use that long term. The other thing with Ethereum to keep in mind is that the gas prices are about 5% of all the payments that users make are actually going to Ethereum miners. And these are just guys who we don't know, nobody knows them. They're guys with GPUs, guys and gals, I suppose, with GPUs who are just like, you know, in a warehouse, you know, by a hydroelectric dam in China, like just mining, you know, or, you know, wherever, in the desert, solar panels in California, I don't know, just mining, just wasting electricity. And so it's not, you know, it's cool, but like we're not really, you know, it's kind of weird for our users to have to give 5% of the fees to them. So the Althea blockchain, that's Ethereum. The Althea blockchain is going to be built on we have been testing right now actually on a blockchain framework called Cosmos, and Cosmos is a proof of stake blockchain. So that means there is a staking token. So the staking token is, those tokens are like, you can think of them as like virtual miners, basically. So instead of wasting electricity, you have to have the staking token to validate transactions and get transaction fees from that. And so the validators are just running servers that validate transactions. They don't have to run GPUs that waste a bunch of electricity or anything like that. They're just running these servers that are pretty, you know, pretty lightweight. So then the staking token never has to be used by the actual users of the system at all. But it's called Alt-G, so ALTG. And then what the users will use is, again, will probably be the DAI stablecoin, which we will be able to bring across onto our blockchain from Ethereum. So what this means is basically that instead of having all these fees go to random Ethereum miners, they're going to be going to people who have the ALTG tokens. And we're spinning up a granting program, and there's, you know, I can't really talk about when this is going to come out, but that will be granting tokens to the users and organizers, Althea organizers, people have Althea hoods and stuff like that. And some of the ALTG tokens will also be probably held by like whoever's doing development on it, probably us. This is all up in the air though still. So basically the idea is that instead of rewarding people with GPUs, we're rewarding people who are part of the Althea ecosystem, which makes a lot more sense. So then the way it works is we need validators, and those are people running the servers I was talking about. And so that's going on our Discord in the Althea Validators channel. And right now what we're doing is we are working on spinning up a test net called Althea Test 3. And me and Justin, we just had 2 validators running Althea Test 2, and we broke it. We broke it by accident. So instead, we just decided to go straight to Althea Test 3, where we get everyone on board. We've got about 10 to 12 validators right now, I think, who are going to be joining in with that. And so the way it works with Cosmos is that you start off a network with a file that's called genesis.json, and that's where you put in everyone's initial token allocations. So everyone who is in that Althea Validators channel and has set up a validator and sent us the address of that validator is going to be put in that genesis.json. Then afterwards, there's going to be something called, well, I don't know what it's called, but it's like basically we're going to make that genesis.json with everyone's tokens in it, testnet tokens, of course. And then those are going to be that's going to be sent out to all the validators. And then they're going to do something called GenTXs, which is where they sign off on that. And then once all the validators are signed off for their GenTXs, then we put those back into the genesis.json. And then that's like the genesis.json at that point is finished. And then we're gonna make sure everyone gets it, and everyone who wants to validate gets it. And then we say, we're gonna start validating at 3 p.m. Pacific time or something, then the next day or whatever it is. So this is our first public testnet, so we're still going through the process and figuring out how to do it best. But that should be happening pretty soon. I might actually start working on that genesis.json today. So that's kind of what's going on. And yeah.
Nice. Anna in the chat just said the 12 apostles. So Anna.
Well, yeah, 2 of those are me and Justin. But we do have enough now that I might actually not run my validator. I think Justin will still run his.
Brecky234 is asking, any idea of when the mainnet will be released?
So yeah, we still have to do, unfortunately, there's a lot of legal stuff around that as well that we need to figure out. What I will say is that validators who are going through this testnet process with us will receive, will receive placement in the genesis of the mainnet, which is good. There's a lot of, the way it works with validation is that token holders, which will be the organizers, users, developers, etc. of Althea, they will be delegating to validators, and it's kind of a selling point if you can say, hey, we were a Genesis validator, and on the Cosmos hub, which is the same kind of system, that's what people have found. So yeah, no, we can't really say when we're going to do the mainnet yet. However, bearing with us through the testnet process is good for the long run. In the medium term, what we're going to be doing, or in the short term actually now, is we're going to be running all of our networks on XDAI, which will be stopgaps we can get off of Ethereum. There's also some other stuff. Basically, there's the bridge between Ethereum and Cosmos networks is not finished yet. The Cosmos team is working on it. And so that means that before, we may have the mainnet up before it's being used in production. However, it's going to need to have that bridge working before it's used in production. So.
Just going through, we did ask for questions for people who signed up to be a part of this. And I think we've covered some of what the questions were asking about. But one person, Jehan, and maybe, I think you did cover this, but just to make sure that we get to this, A person said they saw on the blog that this will be used for subscriber transactions. The Althea blockchain will allow subscribers to pay for internet access in a dollar equivalent token stablecoin rather than needing Ethereum for transaction fees. And then the person is asking, does this mean we are dumping ETH for the end user for our own token, which is stable? So I think you covered that in your description, in your talk. But if you want to go into any more detail, just to make sure it's absolutely clear for everyone out there.
Yeah, we're not going to be using ETH for the end user, and it was always intended to be a stopgap measure. So,
I think there's one part of that that wasn't addressed. It's not for these. So although we will have our own token for staking, the stable coin, we are hoping to use DAI if at all possible, which is a decentralized stable coin that's already on Ethereum and can't really be described as ours. We're not necessarily interested in getting into making a stable coin since that's quite complicated. And the only easy way to do that is centralized again, which is what we're trying to avoid. So that's sort of the only distinction I want to make there. But everything else about that statement is correct.
Cool. And Frecky234 in the chat is asking, would it be possible to start a viable Althea zone before the staking token is cleared of legal issues? Can DAI start to be used before the ALTG is available?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. So the way the proof of stake works is that you actually got to, it starts out with a token distribution, because people are basically staking their token, which is like, that's because if your validator does things wrong, that's well, the one thing the validator can do wrong is basically forking the blockchain by signing 2 blocks at the same height with the same chain ID. If that rule wasn't there, then proof of stake blockchains would fork infinitely into infinitely number of different forks. So, and that's what happened before Tendermint, which is the consensus protocol underlying Cosmos. Anyway, so you do need the tokens to be distributed for proof of stake to work. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, Frecky, let us know if that answers.
That is not so. We can deal with it. I'm probably going to be able to deal with the legal issues around distributing the token a lot. Some of this stuff is already in progress and pretty far along. That's going to be done before the actual bridge to Cosmos is done, because we're kind of relying on the Cosmos team to do that, and it's not really under our control. I mean, we could take it on ourselves, but it's kind of complicated. So there's other things. There's stable coins on Cosmos, on other Cosmos zones, which right now it's only the Korean won, but who knows? Maybe we'll. So in the medium term here, it's going to be on XDAI just to give us the stability that we need. But yeah, so the bridge is really the obstacle, not really the distribution.
Okay. Yep. Frecky234 said yes. The question was answered. And then
cool.
We've been from the Curious Miner. Let's say I'm a Relay user on the network. How would I exchange my coins for US dollars? Okay,
yeah, this is a good question. So this is going to work the same way with XDAI as it is going to work with DAI on Cosmos. And the way that is basically we built code into the routers, which is currently in a heavy testing phase, as Justin can tell you. And basically what it does is when you send Ethereum into the router, what happens is that it gets automatically put through Uniswap on the Ethereum network, and that changes it into DAI on Ethereum. And then it gets sent through the XDAI bridge by the router again automatically, and then it goes onto the XDAI chain, and then the router has it in the form of DAI, basically. Now this makes it so that when the user is using the router, like what it looks like for the user is like you buy some Ethereum on Coinbase or something, And that's Ethereum is very easy to buy everywhere because it's like the second biggest crypto. And then you buy, let's say you buy $50 worth of Ethereum on Coinbase. Then you send it to your router, and then your router on the dashboard has a little message says, you know, converting your, we have to think about what the message is actually going to be still, but it says converting your Ethereum, you know, to, or whatever. I will have to think of the copy. And then after 10, for hopefully 5 minutes when things are going well in the Ethereum network, could go up to as long as half an hour, which is kind of a bummer, but you know, you might want to you do this every once a month or something, so it's not a huge deal. But basically, process it for a while, and then you see the dollars again, the $50 appearing on your router, and then your router can send that around. So that's for the user experience. Like, they don't need to know about all the conversions and stuff that are happening behind the scenes. It's just you put some money into Coinbase, you send some ETH into your router, you see the same money appear on your router dashboard. That's kind of the idea.
Awesome. Awesome. Oh, Frankie did have a follow-up question, asking, so the bridge will be more like this: Ethereum to DAI to Cosmos Hub to the Althea zone? No,
actually, it will. Well, so we, right now the bridge is going to XDAI, and we may do it the same way though for our Althea zone. And the way it will be there is that it will go from Ethereum to DAI over the bridge directly to our Althea zone, so our own blockchain. That being said, it depends on, it's generally things work a lot better on Cosmos and they're a lot faster than they are on Ethereum, partially because it's not getting used a lot, but it's also just more advanced given that it's been, you know, it's had years to learn from Ethereum. So it may be that we feel like once we, you know, in a few months, once there's more stuff done on Cosmos, it might be better if it's possible for us to go from another Cosmos zone that has a stable coin, and people are able to buy it easily in different countries and stuff like that, then it would probably be a lot more faster and efficient if it went from that stablecoin zone. For instance, there's one called Terra, that's the Korean one. We want to wait for it to be dollars probably. But it would go from the stablecoin zone through the hub and then into the Althea zone. That would probably be a much faster process that would happen in a few seconds versus minutes going through the Ethereum stuff. Cool. But right now, foreseeable future, it's going to be a bridge from Ethereum into our zone. So we're pretty independent of the hub.
Got it. So they say thanks. And I apologize if I pronounce anyone's name wrong, but Rourke Rabinowitz is asking, what's the point of having a lot of validators on the network? Would it work the same whether there was 5, 10, 100, 1,000? Also, what benefits does the validator get by having more staking tokens?
Yeah, so, okay, yeah, so there's a lot of questions here. So having more, the Cosmos chain will work with one validator. And when you're running locally, that's how you test it. You just have a local test validator you're testing things on when you're developing for it. Having one validator, obviously, that means that validator controls the entire network. That's bad, first of all, because it's not decentralized. It's also bad because if they have an issue with their machine, then it stops. Same thing, if you have 3 validators, again, not very decentralized. Also, probably if one of those goes down, the network will stop. If 1/3 of the stake on the network is so, you know, people stake the token, stake the staking tokens, the validators. If validators who have at least 1/3 of the tokens staked to them go down, the whole network halts. So having a lot of validators, first of all, makes everything a lot more resilient, just in a technical way. It also makes it more decentralized. And that's what we want. So another reason is that validators, they are able to vote on governance proposals. The token holders, whoever, so I have tokens, let's say Liz is a validator, and I have my tokens staked to Liz. You should, Liz.
I'm trying to get my brother to get his server.
Yeah, maybe Grant can get in on this. If I have my tokens staked to Liz's validator, and there's a governance vote. Let's say they're going to add, the chain is going to, you know, mint some tokens for somebody, or they're going to add a feature to the blockchain software. All these different things. There's votes on that. And as the token holder, if I say, yes, I support this vote, then my vote goes through. But if I'm not paying attention, then Liz's vote will go through with my token. So it's like the validator is almost like a representative in a representative democracy in a way. And I think that's a really powerful feature of the governance. And that's not going to be a big factor short term, but long term, that's really important. So I think validators who have kind of stances on it, like they say, we support the chain being really fast or something. We're always going to vote for things that make the chain faster, you know, and then maybe some other validators say, hey, we support the chain being really decentralized. We're always going to vote for changes to the software that make it more decentralized. And then I'm, depending on what my mentality is as a token holder, I'm going to delegate to people who match that. And that way I'm going to know that if I'm not paying attention, the vote comes up, they're going to vote the way I want. So that's another reason to have a lot of validators. And in terms of 1,000 validators, there is a little bit of an upper limit. The Cosmos Hub right now has a limit of, I think, 125 validators. It used to be 100. They just changed it a few days ago in a governance vote, like I was talking about. The more validators in a proof of stake system, the more validators, the slower the block time. So basically, because it depends on like the votes of all the validators who have enough staking tokens staked to them, the more validators there are, the more basically the more people have to sign off on every block, and it slows things down because of network latency and stuff. So that is the reason. Those are the limits. So we'd like to have stuff like, I mean, if you had 10,000 validators, that'd be great. That'd be way more decentralized. And some other blockchain projects that are not out yet are working on having things where there's like a random selection. So every block, you know, randomly selects which validators are going to participate. So that lets you add more stuff like that. But yeah, basically the sweet spot for the current state of Cosmos blockchains is 100 to 300 validators for it to be reasonably fast.
Awesome. Yeah, so that I think covers a lot of what Jehan was going to talk about and kind of gets us into talking about validators. And Justin is going to give us all the details on the validator program and how to actually get started. So if I wanted to get started, as Jehan suggested, or anyone else out there, Justin's going to let us know how to do that in a lot more detail. So take it away.
Okay, cool. So as a validator, the thing you're really doing is you're running a program. It's essentially like a traditional Ethereum or blockchain full node. So you receive transactions and you will receive and sign off on blocks. Now, that is the key. Well, I won't call it a problem, but the key thing to note is that you are signing off on blocks that contain transactions, and your signature and the key you use to make that signature is what really matters and what you need to keep secure. So the way bad validators are punished on Cosmos is a process called slashing, in which you lose currently 5% of your staked tokens. That number could change. And this is pretty bad. Not as bad as volatile crypto markets, since 5% is actually not that big of a daily swing. But it's also gone forever, so that's sort of not good. As a validator, your job is to run a machine with a secure private key that remains online and continues to validate blocks as long as you say that you will validate blocks. Because as long as you have a slot on the validators list, currently limited at 100, you're using up that slot. So if your validator goes offline for more than currently 16 hours, you will also be slashed because you're using that slot and you haven't given it up. You can just give it up if you want to stop validating. There's a command you can run. So yeah, with those sorts of key points outlined, we can start thinking about how we would want to set up a validator. Now, first off, I'm going to give technical advice, but it's obviously up to you to accept any staking risks and take on the responsibilities of being a validator. Of course, for the testnet, it's all fake money anyways, so go hog wild. Now,
I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah.
it's actually good for us not to give people too much advice. It's good for the chain. Because if we just said, hey, here's a Docker file, here's everything you need, you just press a button and it spins up on AWS or whatever. Then if there was one mistake in that, our network would halt basically. But if we tell everybody, hey, figure it out, everybody's going to be making different mistakes, or hopefully no mistakes at all. But if they're making different mistakes, that's also just as good, because it means that people are only going to go offline. They're going to go offline at different times, and the whole network's going to keep going. So that's part of the reasoning there, not making it too easy.
Yeah, so that is why I do not provide automated scripts for this. I provide automated scripts for everything else on Althea, but there aren't going to be any to be a validator. We do provide instructions on how to generally get started with Gaia D. If you look at our Althea Zone GitHub repository, which I believe will be posted in the chat. But yeah, I'm also not going to suggest a hosting provider. So in order to be a validator, you need a server running somewhere. A lot of people's first instinct is to reach for a virtual machine on a cloud service like Amazon Web Services or DigitalOcean. Generally, we would recommend against validating using a virtual machine because how should I put it? If too many so let's say we have a blockchain, all the validators are on AWS. Amazon is the one who actually controls the blockchain at that point, because they can go and steal everybody's validating keys, steal everyone's tokens, and then go on and drive the blockchain off into the metaphorical sunset. So that's not good. It's safe to do for test nets because that's not really going to be a problem. And if you're doing a really small toy validator without much money on it, it's probably not going to hurt anyone. But you want to avoid it if you're going to be a serious validator. Fortunately, there are plenty of places where you can rent physical servers where your storage is not so directly monitored. I'm not going to suggest any because, once again, I don't want everybody to end up hosted at one hosting provider that's providing physical services, because then the provider could just unplug all the machines, run around and read the keys off the disks, even though that's a lot more work than it would be for Amazon with a fleet of virtual machines. So we also want to avoid that. If you just want to have a desktop running in your house, that's completely viable. I would suggest a battery backup and not doing that in a place where the internet goes out often. But that would actually probably be the most physically secure solution.
I will say that people actually, a lot of Cosmos Hub validators use Ledger Nano S devices plugged into their servers, which means that nobody can actually steal the key. They could still break, if there was an evil data center employee, they could still break the validator and result in the validator getting slashed, but at least the key is secure in that case.
Yeah, so in the two cases where you have physical access to the machine, which is either a co-location, which is where you pay to rack your own server in a data center and it's locked in a cage where only you should have physical access, or you host it at home. In both cases, you can plug in a Ledger hardware wallet and actually have the key in the ledger. And the idea there is that it is a last line of defense. If your server gets compromised, it is unlikely that the attacker will be able to also compromise the ledger and actually retrieve your private key. They could still sign 2 blocks for you and get you slashed, though. So it's some protection, but don't rely on it all the way. Yeah, so let me see. Did the Althea Zone link get published? Yes, so see the GitHub link in chat for enough information to get started, and otherwise, have fun. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Exact hardware specs. Right now, the storage requirements are essentially 0 since the chain is starting. I would want at least 500 gigs of storage on your validating server, though. Maybe 2 gigs of RAM, 3. It really depends on how many transactions are being processed, but you don't really need that much, nor do you need an exceptionally powerful processor for now. The exact hardware requirements in the future will be determined by expected transaction volume, and we can probably get some good data from when they did Game of Stakes with Cosmos for exactly what sort of specs you need for a given transaction volume. And then I guess we should estimate how likely we are to use a given volume and get back to everybody with an exact number to spec for the final chain. But for the testnet, you can do it on a potato. So have fun.
Also, just to expand on that with the Cosmos game of stakes stuff. So basically, we are using we're using Cosmos. The whole network setting up process and all that stuff basically looks just like Cosmos. So if you want to learn about how to be a validator on Althea, learning how to be a validator on Cosmos is going to get you all the way there, basically. There's many guides out there written by different Cosmos validators on how they do things. So if you do some searching, you find a lot of stuff. I also want to say there's other Cosmos zones. I posted one in our Althea Validators Discord channel the other day, which is Regen Network, who's doing a blockchain that's going to track environmental sustainability stuff like stopping deforestation and that kind of thing. There's a bunch of other Cosmos zones spinning up right now. And so if you're really interested in being a validator, it's not really going to cost you much more to validate on a bunch of different zones, and you're going to learn stuff from every one of them, and you're going to be a better validator. So I would encourage you to get into that.
Great. That's great advice. Just a few more questions from the chat. Freaky234 asks, rough idea of how the distribution of ALTG will be done percentage-wise.
This is one of the things that we can't talk about too much before the legal stuff is sorted out. It's not 2016 anymore. But the one thing that is certain is that a third of the tokens, at least a third of the tokens, will be granted to community members, to organizers and users of Althea. And we think that this is a good. I mean, it's good. It's a good business decision as well as being heartwarming or whatever. It's really a good business decision because that's what we want to separate. This whole thing. We don't want to just be like Comcast, but with a blockchain. We want it to be a little bit more, owned by the people using it, and by doing a lot of the granting that separates us from more corporate ISPs.
Awesome. And then the Curious Miner asked, does network speed matter for this validator?
So that's a bit of a nuanced question. So the limit to the number of validators is determined by your block speed combined with the latency between all the validators. So latency very definitely matters. If you're using satellite internet from a low Earth orbit satellite, from a geostationary satellite, you're gonna have a problem. And nobody's using satellite internet from low Earth orbit satellites except for SpaceX testing personnel yet. So, yeah, can't do that. The actual throughput speed doesn't matter quite as much. Obviously, as the number of transactions really gets up there, you're going to need a faster connection. But I don't foresee a situation in which it would ever exceed the speed of like one 4K video stream. So mostly it's latency.
I believe what happens if your latency is too high is that you miss blocks. And you're probably not going to get slashed for that. You have to be missing blocks continuously for like 16 hours to actually get slashed. And it's even then, the slashing for that is much, much lower than it is for double signing. However, if token holders are looking for validators to delegate to, most of the interfaces that you look at validators, for instance, Figment, which is a Cosmos Hub validator who's also going to be on Althea as well. They have a tool called Hubble, and you can look at all the different validators. It shows you what their uptime's like. And so if somebody's got, somebody's looking for a validator to delegate to, and they look at the graph and they see this thing is down all the time, missing blocks all the time because it has high latency, that doesn't inspire confidence. So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, I think, with latency.
Yeah. So you could probably get away with it, but maybe at some point your latency gets a little bit too high and you start missing all the blocks, and then things will end badly. But in general, most connections, regardless of the speed, except geosynchronous satellite connections, have pretty low latency. So
awesome. There was one other question from our sign up form, and the person just wrote routers ? I'm not sure what that means exactly, but maybe we can expand a little bit on the routers that we're using and how they work in this whole process. If anyone wants to take on routers question mark.
I'll just say really quickly that they don't have anything to do with validation.
Yeah, this is correct.
Yeah.
And I'll actually expand on that to start with. So one of the choices we very specifically made when designing Althea is that we wanted to be able to use existing commodity hardware for our user routers, because custom hardware is very expensive. For example, what you could buy for $10 that was mass produced may cost hundreds of dollars if it were not mass produced. For example, there's no reason that cryptocurrency hardware wallets could not cost $5, except that they aren't produced in significant volume to allow that. So we wanted to use existing high volume hardware that we could buy off the shelf. And that means that there's not enough storage or RAM or really anything to do something reasonably blockchain-like. You can't really store a whole blockchain on these. You don't have enough spare processing power to validate, for example. So this is why there's a very clear separation in the Althea system between home routers, which are run on commodity Wi-Fi router hardware, and validators, which are run on servers. Now, to talk about like what sort of routers we usually use, we run on anything that supports OpenWRT, which is a lot of things. In fact, it's almost everything you could reasonably consider a computer and then some. But we have 3 devices that we really stick with as our standard options these days, and we're using GL iNet B1300. This is an AC Wi-Fi router that comes in at about $85 and gets 100 megabits. They're nice. They're easy to get your hands on. They're impossible to brick, which is always a big advantage. And they work pretty well for the price. As sort of a medium offering, we step up to this, which is a Linksys 3200 ACM. This is very nice for how much it costs. It's pretty much all solid plastic and metal on the construction. And the processor inside is quite fast, so it'll hit up to 500 megabits, maybe 600 on a very good day. And that costs about $200, so it's a little over twice the price as the GL for more than twice the speed. Now, if you want to go gigabit, you can. The options just start to get weirder at that point because you can either pick like a really like a micro firewall device, or you could go for a sort of use desktop. We're still exploring and trying to come to a solid option for a gigabit deployment that everybody will really like. So far, everybody who has wanted that has sort of done their own thing. So yeah, that's a sort of an overview of our consumer router options. If you're running a gateway or other infrastructure hardware, you can use an old desktop, you can use a traditional server, you can use one of these if you want. These will work fine as a gateway, although they'll be a little slow for that. Yeah, so we're very flexible on hardware choice. You don't buy any of the networking gear you use to run Althea from us because we use white label existing commodity hardware to keep prices down, and this is why we can hook up users for less than $200 for a set of infrastructure to their home.
Awesome. So I think that covers everything. Are there any? There are no. I think I got to everyone's questions in the chat, and the ones that we had from the sign up form. Do you guys want to just go down the line and give some last words? We can start with you, Deborah, and then Jehan, and then Justin, and then we can sign off. We're about on time. Look at that.
Yeah, just to iterate, if you're interested in running an Althea network on the ground, definitely reach out, sign up to become an organizer. You can also email myself, Deborah, at althea.net. And I can help you get started with that and go over the next steps.
Awesome. And I'll pop that link, the Get Involved link, in the chat as well. It's also in the description. There's a bunch of links to follow us in the description and our Twitter handles and everything. So yeah, Jehan?
Oh man, I always hate the last words. So basically, if you want to start validating, go to our Discord channel and it's in the Althea Validators room. Have we posted a invite link to that, Liz?
No, but I can.
Yeah.
Do I have one?
Just copy the one off of the bottom of our site. There's a link that says chat. That one will do.
Got it. Thanks. I will get that up.
Cool. And so for my closing statements, we're going to have beta 7 out by the end of this week, hopefully. And that comes with mostly just fixes. And you should go ahead and take a look on GitHub for that. Other things that you may find interesting, if you visit blog.althea.net and see my latest blog post. If you're in the latest development update, I introduced a script that will allow you to spin up a really easy Docker container, and that will show you Althea working in a one-machine testnet that virtualizes a 6-node, 1-exit configuration. So if you're technically interested in Althea and don't want to have a desk full of routers like me, that may be a quick way for you to play around with it.
And I'll pop that in the chat too, right before we fully sign off. And yeah, I think that covers everything. All the links are there. And yeah, stay connected with us. Join our Discord chat. Follow us on Twitter. We're Althea Network. Jehan, Deborah, and Justin's Twitter handles are all in the description as well. So feel free to ask us questions, any of those places. And yeah, we're looking forward to more people getting involved and becoming validators and organizers and just staying in touch. So, and until next month, that's all. Bye.